In Brazil, the government of President Luiz Inacio Lula da Silva says it's evaluating all possible actions to respond to President Trump's tariffs. All goods from Brazil, that's Latin America's biggest economy, will be subject to a 10% levy. Vinicius Rodrigues Vieira is an associate professor of economics and international relations at the Armando Alvares Penteado Foundation, and he joins us now from Sao Paulo. Many thanks for joining us. So a 10% tariff, I mean, Brazil got off relatively lightly when you compare it to many countries in Asia, in Southeast Asia and China. How's it going to respond, though?
Well, thank you very much for the invitation. I don't think Brazil is going to respond to this tariff of 10% because it's much lower than what was initially expected here in the country. The government was working with a scenario in which Brazil would suffer a 25% tariff, and then President Lula, considering that scenario, said that Brazil would retaliate. I'm not saying here that no retaliation is unforeseeable in the near future. However, I think Brazil has more to lose if it retaliates, because that may generate escalation with Mr. Trump, and Brazil's industry, particularly, and agriculture, rely a lot on imports from the United States, including fertilizers, for instance, and components for aircraft, in which Brazil is so competitive after assembling the aircraft and exporting regional jets, including to the U.S. market. So I don't see, again, any potential retaliation at this stage.
I mean, does Brazil sort of see any rationale behind these tariffs? Because this is one of the countries that has a trade deficit with the US. The US imports more into Brazil than Brazil imports into the US, if you include goods and services into the equation. So is there anyone there who sees sense in this?
Yeah, there is a kind of sentiment that the United States is treating Brazil in a quite unfair manner, and that's what the government tried to do in the last weeks, trying to show the U.S. government, along with data presented by U.S. entrepreneurs who operate in Brazil, and trying to persuade Trump's administration that Brazil already offers a surplus to the United States. It's Brazil who's having the deficits. Having said that, it's well known that Mr. Trump, he's doing those tariffs, he's imposing those tariffs more as a means to demonstrate to his voters that he's trying to do something to make America great again. And that means to make American industrial power again. Of course, all reasonable economics textbook would say that tariffs no longer work as a means of developing industrial policy, but that's Mr. Trump's bet. Moreover, I think Trump, he decided to impose different tariffs, like 10% for Brazil, 10% also for Colombia, for Turkey, while imposing much higher levies for Asia, as a means of signaling that he's still willing to deal more closely in political terms with the Western Hemisphere and some countries like Turkey that are still far away from China's influence. In the meantime, Asia will literally be left for China in this new division of the world that Trump seems to envision, a division between the United States, Russia, and China eventually.
Trump may be trying to diminish China's influence on the global trade market, but one wonders whether this is actually going to backfire, and countries like Brazil will be looking to China for new markets to fill the gap.
Exactly, particularly in what concerns agriculture, there is indirect effect. As we know, Brazil is quite competitive as an agribusiness exporter. And China is already the main market for Brazil's exports of soybeans, also beef, poultry, among other products. As China is no longer importing those goods from the United States, there will be a huge demand from Brazilian farmers to supply the Chinese market. But as far as the exports from Brazil to the United States are concerned, Brazil doesn't export so much agribusiness products. Mainly, the most competitive markets for Brazil in the United States are semi-manufactured goods and low-added value manufacturers, like shoes, for instance. In the sense, it's quite hard for Brazil to find new markets. Fortunately, the tariff is not as high as the government initially expected, which means that at least part of this flow of trade of semi-manufactured goods and low-added value manufactured consumption goods is likely to remain in place, notwithstanding Trump's tariffs.
Okay. Vinicius Rodrigues Vieira, great good to get your thoughts there from Sao Paulo. Many thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Make sure to subscribe to our channel to get the latest news from Al Jazeera.